Like, hey, buddy. Oh! Oh! I'm breakdancing in the middle of the street. Don't bother me.
Oh, shit.
I'm a fan of both of these characters. Well, I mean, both of them sort of kind of went insane, and like both of them, you know, had delusions of grandeur, like they were going to be saviors of some kind. I mean, and Magneto really didn't, like, neither of them really cared who they hurt. Although Tetsuo, I can't really 100% blame him for how things turned out with him, because, you know, he really didn't have any way to control what he had. And Magneto, like, he had full control over what he was doing, but yet he still chose to be absolutely psychotic when it came to certain things. Like, for instance, tearing all the adamantium out of Wolverine's body. Who does that?
He does.
Fair enough. So,
it's like, so this is one of those battles that, you know, it's a comic book character versus an anime character.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I already know who's going to win, probably. Because comic book characters are just kind of next level, but I do love Akira.
I like Akira, too. I
wouldn't necessarily root for Tetsuo either, because obviously Conor does, you know, kind of your protagonist you root for.
Well,
in that
Connie does
show.
the protag, but here's the thing you got to remember with
Tetsuo was its friend, but, you know, he ends up being not necessarily the villain, but he's the antagonist by the end of it for reasons.
Yeah, he doesn't choose to do the things that he does because he wants to. He literally has no control over what his body is doing
Pretty
half
much.
the time. And that's the saddest part.
It's like, I honestly the whole time didn't really 100% know for sure if he even knew what was happening to him.
Well, that last part, like, in the stadium, I guarantee you 100% he had no idea what the fuck was going on.
Yeah.
And during that part is actually, like some of the worst shit happening. I mean, damn.
Oh, yeah. That's the whole...
I mean, his girlfriend...
That's the part of the movie that just sticks in your head.
And
the fuck.
And Kaneda tried everything he could to, like, stop it from happening. I mean, that laser that he used at the end, I mean... If he would have gotten the right shot on Tetsuo, that would have been it. But again, just, you know, unfortunately, it's just how things turned out. But Akira is one of the most iconic anime of all time. It's one of the most iconic films ever made in terms of animation, in terms of quality.
It pretty much
set
up for future animation to come, basically.
Yes, and it was I think it was the standard.
It was like slightly ahead of its time.
Oh yeah, I think it was the standard for at least the next 10, 15 years, easily. It wasn't until the turn of the millennium where things started to, like, take a drastic leap in other directions. And, you know, also that was also, I think, when Miyazaki was at his peak, too. You know, 97 through 2000, like, I'd say, yeah, 97 through 2002, that was when Miyazaki was at his peak, when he did Mononoke and he did Spirited Away. Some say Howl's Moving Castle can be counted that as well. I mean, maybe so. I don't know. I think Howl's Moving Castle's good, but I still think Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke are his two best works by far.
Like, I really like the visuals from Howl's Moving Castle.
Oh, I do too.
Story-wise, I definitely preferred Spirited Away.
That's a lot of people. And, well, it's because, again, they were trying to adapt the Howl's Moving Castle series from Diana Wynne Jones, and, you know, things sometimes get lost in translation, and not only that, but also there's a lot of story there that they were not able to encapsulate into Howl's Moving Castle. I think,
and that in turn, I think, made it a little bit difficult for me to completely follow all the way through.
Yeah,
I was kind of confused as to why certain things were happening, and certain things that were happening seemed kind of forced to an extent.
Yeah, and again, I think it's, you make sacrifices for the plot, like you make sacrifices to the overarching story to move the plot forward, and I think, you know, Miyazaki did the best with what he had, but again, I think if they had two films to tell the story, I think it would have been a lot better.
Yeah. It's still a really cool movie.
Oh, still a great film. But anyway, we have a death battle here. Magneto versus Tetsuo. Marvel versus Akira. And, come on, get on screen. There we go, finally. Okay. So, yeah, this thing's been, again, it's just little difficulties with it, but, beats the alternative. Anyway, we have this queued up here. Let's give it a watch.
Magneto, Marvel's mutant master of magnetism.
Tetsuo Shima, Akira's telekinetic terror of Neo Tokyo.
These two maestros of kinesis have ignited revolution not just in their worlds, but also the very mediums they exist within.
He's Wiz and I'm Boomstick.
And it's our job to analyze their weapons, armor, and skills to find out who would win a death battle.
Here we go.
In the short duration of modern civilization, likely no conflict tested humanity more than the Second World War. In the primary Marvel 616 universe, this fact is no different, especially to the Eisenhart family and their only son.
You may know him as Magnus, Erik, or Max, but if you ask him, he'd say his true name is Magneto.
As a Jewish child in Nazi Germany, Magneto's early life was, well, extremely traumatic.
I actually don't think I realized what his background was.
Well, I mean, the original X-Men movie that came out, the first one, showed it very vividly. You know, his parents, him and his parents in the concentration camp, basically being separated.
Remember that?
Oh, dude, it was a hell of an opening scene. I mean, Jesus.
Maybe I didn't actually ever get to watch that first X-Men movie. I know my buddy Shane showed me several X-Men movies to kind of catch me up before Apocalypse came out. But I'm thinking maybe we didn't watch the really early ones.
Well, X-Men and X-Men 2 are definitely worth it. X2 is probably my favorite. Was probably my favorite X-Men movie before Days of Future Past. But still, I mean, the first one, that scene at Auschwitz and the scene at there's a lot of scenes that I really like from the first Bryan Singer X-Men movie. But the scene that they were talking about right there, Erik was basically being separated from his parents, and he was reaching out to try and get to them, and he was pulling a bunch of Nazis with him as he was gripping on, trying to he didn't realize what was happening, but the metal gate that he was pointing his hand at was twisting and contorting, and then eventually they looked, and the gate was just crunched up really bad. It was amazing. I love that scene so much. It's really powerful. But yeah, and also dislikes discrimination, Nazis, and wooden guns. Also, they forgot plastic guns. He hates plastic guns too because trying not to keep interrupting.
Certain death with his future wife, misfortune always followed wherever he went.
Thanks to his unexpected mutation called the X gene, the mark of a superhuman. After settling down in Russia with his new family, the KGB quickly found out about this quirk, so they burned his house down with his own daughter inside.
Naturally, he snapped and killed them all. I don't blame him. I'd do that too. Too bad his wife didn't get it and ditched him though. But that's when Magneto made a choice. Since humans hurt him his entire life, he'd do the same to them in the name of mutants everywhere.
At first, Magneto turned to the telepathic powerhouse Charles Xavier and his fledgling team of heroes. But his new friend wasn't thrilled with the idea of, subjugating the human race. So, Magneto formed his own team of mutants, the Brotherhood.
Magneto can telekinetically move, bend, and reshape any metal he's aware of. Bullets, vehicles, buildings, you name it. Even himself when he manipulates his personal magnetic field for flight and energy barriers.
Magnetic kinesis is far more versatile than it would appear at first glance. The blood in your body has iron in it. The air has traces of lead and mercury. Whole mountains are lined with metallic ore. The Earth itself is surrounded by a literal magnetic field.
So many toys for Maggie to play with. He can detect magnetic fields at such a huge range, he can even pinpoint Earth's magnetic rays while stranded on a planet in another galaxy. And guess what? He was able to use those rays to pull himself back to Earth in a single day.
His range is even more remarkable than that. Did you know that in 1820, physicist Hans Christian Ørsted discovered that electric currents, like those of electrons and protons and atoms, produce their own magnetic fields? Magneto can fine-tune his control to affect these these very subatomic particles. Dummy here will illustrate such a particle, with positively charged protons and negative electrons.
My life is as meaningless as an atom is small.
So what you're saying is Magneto could, yank one of those out?
Correct, potentially changing an atom's entire chemical makeup. However, neutrons do not have a charge, and without the ability to adjust those to accommodate the change in atomic mass, the atom would become unstable and...
Finally!
Sweet death.
do that. Magneto's violent protest against
Sounds
humankind
like a pretty
clashed
easy way
with
to beat
Xavier's
Tetsuo.
peaceful reconciliation, not unlike the ideologies taught by Malcolm X and Dr. King, by whom Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were inspired. Magneto would spend most of his career pushing Xavier away to prove his philosophies superior, which meant doing battle with Xavier's school of thought, quite literally.
And Baldy's mind powers are no joke, but thanks to Magneto's psionic repelling helmet, Professor X couldn't touch him. Magneto survived Cyclops' earth-splitting lasers, absorbed the power of the sun to battle Iron Man, ripped the adamantium skeleton out of Wolverine's body, and even taken on Hercules himself. You know, the Greek legend, Zero to Hero, the guy who held up the skies of Olympus for Atlas? That Hercules.
Seems sensible. Magneto once used the Earth's magnetic field to overwhelm the Phoenix Force, which can effortlessly destroy planets, let alone far more.
Hell, if he really wanted to, Magneto could totally just fling the Earth off its axis.
It's entirely possible he may have eventually resorted to just that. Over time, it became clear Magneto's war was doing far more harm than good for his fellow mutants, however well-intentioned he may have been at first.
Luckily, he later realized he was going a bit overboard and began reevaluating his perspective. Good for you, Mags. It's really tough to recognize when you're the baddie.
It took time and patience not just from Magneto, but also from his peers. Yet eventually, his path was completely changed. He even became a leader for Xavier's X-Men.
But don't let his new goody two-shoes ways fool you. Whenever there's a threat to mutants, you can bet Magneto will be there to annihilate it. Forever, by any means necessary.
Basically. And that's one bright side I will say about Magneto's story is that in most of them he actually does recover and become a good mutant, a good person.
Yeah, well, because when you think about it, it's very sad that he decided to be the way he was at first, because he essentially became the same thing that, persecuted him as a kid.
Well,
like, he pretty much was like, mutants are basically the superior race, and humans are assholes. So
that vicious cycle,
which is
continues.
basically, mutant Hitler.
Well, again, it's the vicious cycle. You think you're doing right when eventually you realize, oh God, I have become the very thing that I sought to fight against.
That's definitely a situation where eye for an eye makes the whole world blind does apply. For sure.
Yes, it does. God.
Because in other situations, in the literal sense of revenge, I'm like one of those people. I'm like, revenge is situational. It's like you should evaluate the worth and everything.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like, does someone deserve something when
they
they've done a
deserve to
certain
die?
thing?
Yeah.
Because an eye for an eye doesn't make the whole world blind, because we all have two eyes.
Well, but
you just have to wear an eye patch. Unless you just are unfortunate enough to have one eye to start with. But if you only have one eye to start with, maybe don't go taking other people's eyes.
Well, yeah, and also there was a saying that came out of it: an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, but the man with one eye is king. Basically, that's I've heard that saying before too, but it's
I kind of look at it more in the whole thing with the quote from Firefly: if somebody ever tries to kill you, you make sure you try and kill them right back. It just depends.
So basically, the Texas play. It's like, you come to Texas and you kill somebody, we will kill you back.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. God. Okay, so.
If someone there's certain situations where it's not that big of a deal. It's if someone literally throws a water balloon at me out of nowhere, and I'll look over and see water balloons, I'm gonna fucking throw one back at them.
Exactly. Well, it's retaliation. It's basic. It's human nature.
But if someone runs into my car I'm not gonna just turn around and run back into their.
No, that's, like, there's
you got to put some logic.
There's
to it.
common conflict, and then there's accidents. Accidents happen all the time. Just all right. Let's go ahead and get back into this.
This episode of Death Battle is sponsored by
HelloFresh, and yeah,
keep thinking about trying something like that, but I don't know.
and the
Especially
third.
now with the
Go
food
a new
shortages that's starting to happen. I don't even know if they'll still be able to keep that stuff going.
Over 30 years ago, a new type of bomb was set off over Tokyo, and 9 hours later began the Third World War.
Welcome to 2030, or 2019 if you're watching the anime. The buildings are taller, the motorcycles are cooler, and the future is brighter. Oh, wait, not really. If you find yourself in the capsule gang, you'll meet Shotaro Kaneda,
I mean, there are
who's
more
like your
neon
textbook
lights,
anime
but
Chad. Gets
shit's
the
pretty bad.
ladies, beats the baddies, and cops the sweetest rigs. Man, I need to get me one of those.
Bike is
And then there's
that bike is balling.
so bitching.
Yeah, it is, dude. Kaneda's bike. I remember when I saw it being used by Artemis in Ready Player One. I'm just like, I want that.
little brother.
100%. If like
Kaneda's best friend.
I ever have a whole
Tetsuo
lot of
Shima.
money and can get
He's-
someone to custom make me
well,
a bike,
The
yeah, I'd
exact
definitely
opposite.
grab one of
A
those.
total wimp. As a kid, Tetsuo in his college thesis forehead got bullied for being the new kid at the orphanage. That's until Big Bro Kaneda came to the rescue.
Eventually, the two went to vocational school together and formed the Capsules. But Tetsuo was never satisfied with Kaneda being the leader of the pack. Tetsuo desired more than anything to be top dog.
Oh, I can just see that monkey's paw curling in my mind. Or that kid walking down the street. Shit! Tetsuo, watch out! You're gonna...
Ooh.
That definitely should have killed him. But since it didn't, Tetsuo earned himself a ticket to military confinement. Turns out they had an under-the-table program for developing child superweapons.
In the same program that backfired and jump-started the war, Tetsuo became Japan's Esper number 41.
He may not have been a natural with bikes, baddies, or babes, but this telekinesis stuff hit different.
yeah.
He walked out of that hospital ward effortlessly flying, reading minds, and blending people into strawberry jelly. Tetsuo got what he wanted. Power, along with the hunger for more of it.
A hunger that used to only be satiated with drugs. And not just any gateway drug, pills so potent that a single gram of the stuff could kill you.
So, pretty bad. Kinda reminds me of college days, huh, Snow Wizard?
Tetsuo's main ability is his constantly increasing psionic energy, growing more and more powerful over time. This is due to Tetsuo's link to, quote, the memories of the universe, end quote. It's weird.
Either way, Tetsuo leveled up from lame gangbuster to certified badass. This guy is a walking natural disaster. His telekinesis can shake the planet, easily cause earthquakes.
All right, I take it back. There's stuff I
1,000 miles
forgot.
below
He
the
did kind of become a villain to an extent.
Yeah.
surface. He can summon psychic barriers for defense and crush foes with friggin' gravity wells. He can dart around as a literal bolt of lightning, or even teleport in an instant.
Tetsuo's telekinesis can be so precise he can target and obliterate specific parts of the body. He can heal severe wounds quickly, but even after losing a whole limb, he can craft a new one using whatever nearby materials he wants.
With these powers, Top Dog Kaneda didn't matter anymore. Who needed his approval? Tetsuo tasted that good shit and he was hooked. And when he found out another Esper named Akira could deal him even more power, he rampaged through Tokyo to find him.
And this is where versions of the story differ.
Spoilers ahoy!
You may be familiar with the 1988 animation, where Akira had been dissected for research. However, in the original manga, Akira is not only alive, but even more powerful.
Once that little runt nuked Tokyo, Tetsuo would erect the Great Tokyo Empire with Akira and himself as its leaders. But he ended up just abusing the position for endless sex and inflating his ego.
With Kaneda's rebellion at his front door, Tetsuo took a turn for the worse. He had to fight.
Tetsuo's defeated other powerful Espers, dodged light-speed lasers, and jumped to the moon faster than anyone could blink, and then punched a big old hole in it. And
There's
if you
apparently
ask,
a lot more stuff that happens in
wouldn't
the
that
manga
mess
that
up
doesn't happen in the
gravity
movie.
I would love to see another adaptation of Akira with the full, like, again, I love the movie, but I would love to see like a series.
Yeah, like at least a mini series or something, depending on how long.
Yeah, like a
it is.
3-4 episode miniseries. It's like an hour or 90 minutes long each.
I'm gonna have to go get a hold of the manga now.
I might have to
Give it a
read it after
read.
you get finished.
Yeah.
Damn.
on Earth, you would be right because it totally did. Screwed the planet, I guess. Stupid moon.
Which brings us to Tetsuo's folly. His abuse of his powers spiraled until he lost control. Unfortunately for Kanada's rebellion, this did not make Tetsuo an easier enemy to confront. Exactly opposite, in fact, has Tetsuo painfully mutated into an unstoppable behemoth.
Yep, that's not totally disturbing at all.
That's nightmare fuel.
I'm happy to say the manga's version is even more disturbing.
I mean, I know babies can be monsters, but that's a whole nother level.
It is pain incarnate. I can relate. Another Esper described Tetsuo's struggle as ego death, which has multiple definitions, but in this case is likely symbolic of the version attributed to drug use.
Yeah, it's described as a shedding of one's own identity, like how LSD can emulate a wild out-of-body experience, and you come back with a new perspective. Though this is maybe a little more extreme. In fact, you could say Tetsuo was shedding his human body to play with the powers of a god.
I wish I could shed out of my body. But in this case, Tetsuo going full out of body meant becoming a mound of raw, ever-expanding energy.
Which almost nuked Tokyo all over again. And those explosions are not normal. I would know.
Top scientists in both the manga and animated versions describe these explosions as births of a new universe.
Given its properties of nuclear fusion and proton collapse, Tetsuo's mutated form was likely creating a big bang.
You know, the thing that started our whole universe?
Right, in the manga, it instead ended the Espers and their abilities once and for all. A testament that humankind is unsuited to wield the powers of the divine.
Though the anime's even more trippy. Thanks to Akira and his buddies, Tetsuo got so high on ego death, he ascended time-space to become god of a new universe. Kinda worth it, right?
And yet, Kaneda kept his empire up in his honor, now as the Great Akira Empire. Ironically, in death, Tetsuo finally received the attention he so desperately craved.
This episode of Death Battle is fun.
Damn. It's pretty heavy shit, dude.
Yeah.
Code Death Battle.
All right, the combatants are set. We've run the data through all possibilities.
It's time for a death battle!
Who you got?
I still think, like, everybody was
Magneto.
saying in the previous ones, like, comic book characters are just pretty much on another level, you know?
Yeah, I would say Magneto.
Because there are multiple things he can exploit at a weakness with Tetsuo. Like, you know, he loses a limb, he can just make another one from stuff around, but like, he made it from like metal and shit, you know? So like, that's something Magneto could just rip back off of him and beat him with his own arm, you know? Like,
Yeah, literally just, There's a lot of things that Magneto
and that whole like being able to just make an atom explode, like, I feel like he can just basically just sort of, even
He
if
can rip all the
even if he
electrons
turns into
out of-
like super big like flesh mass monster, you know, like, I think he can just pretty much just make him explode.
He'll just be like, oh hey, protons. Bye. And then that's it. I think Magneto's got this. I agree. All right. Let's
I'll
see.
be surprised if he loses.
Me too. Let's see what happens.
Even in Japan, they fail to recognize our superiority.
Wrong country, Grandpa! You're in Akira turf now!
Hell yeah. It's already some really cool fast-paced animation.
Oh yeah.
Impudent child!
The hell are you calling child? I make the rules around here!
You're wasting my time. Politics for the master
Disarm.
of magnetism.
Your history, scumbag!
Whoa!
Oh! Oh shit! Uh-oh.
I believe I've had enough tantrums to last a lifetime.
Oh, here we go.
Listen, welcome, I'll handle this on my own. Not die! Hurts. Help me.
Oh!
Whoa! He just used the iron from blood to make blades?
Yes, he did. He's done that before.
Poor child.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
That's pretty cool.
We
Like the characters are almost always like fighting each other for like, you know, fuck you reasons, and like it's cool that they actually went with the story of like, you know, it hurts, like put me out of my misery, like help, you know.
And there you go.
That's neat.
That's what
I
happened.
like that they did that.
Yeah, I'm never doing that again.
Tetsuo's esoteric telekinesis and other bizarre abilities certainly gave Magneto pause, but the Master of Magnetism had greater control over his foe.
The numbers don't lie. Tetsuo cratering the moon was insane, but Magneto punched Iron Man with the force of the sun. And while Tetsuo jumped all the way to the moon, Magneto could move across galaxies.
Against Tetsuo in his human form, Magneto obviously held a sizable advantage in power and speed.
But stats aren't all that matters. With his precise telekinesis, Tetsuo could just target Magneto's organs. GG, right?
Yes, but Magneto had similar skills. There are very few substances on Earth that lack any metallic or magnetic component, and Magneto is very creative with his powers.
Which he could use to predict Tetsuo's teleportation and even shut down his telekinesis. And his scraps with Xavier prove he could handle Tetsuo's messing with his head. The biggest challenge for Magneto was when Tetsuo's gross mutated power came into play.
Especially given how the detonations from this form were compared to that of a Big Bang. Although the authenticity of that observation is questionable. In truth, the Big Bang was a sudden expansion of matter on a universal scale, whereas Tetsuo's explosions are more akin to nuclear blasts, clearly intentional given the post-war symbolism of the Akira story.
The whole creating an alternate universe bit wasn't even part of the original material, so we can't exactly call it canon.
But let's just say the comparison wasn't superfluous. Let's say Tetsuo did in fact cause a Big Bang capable of creating or destroying an entire universe, alternate or otherwise.
Turns out Magneto had the tools to stop that too. Helmet Head could overpower Hercules, who was strong enough to hold up the skies of Olympus, which is literally heaven and an alternate universe.
This doesn't necessarily mean Magneto could easily destroy a universe with a snap of his fingers, but it does prove he can match a similar level of power. And context is everything. Tetsuo's Big Bang eruption specifically exhibited proton collapse, meaning its atomic structure was primarily an unstable mess of neutrons and electrons. And Magneto has detected and commanded unstable electrons before. This means Magneto had every means available to take control over this Big Bang.
Damn, and I thought he could just move some metal around. It's like the question posed by some of the greatest prophets of our time. Fucking magnets. How do they even work?
Magneto's astonishing.
He referenced the Insane Clown Posse song. Hell yeah.
You.
I did not expect that at all.
I applaud you, Boomstick. Well done. Well done. Fucking Mac. How do they work?
This might be my favorite death battle ever.
Power and intelligent control over all things magnetism triumphed in the end.
Tetsuo pushed his luck, but didn't have the metal to pull off the win.
The winner is Magneto.
That's what I thought.
That was a badass death battle. That was
I really enjoyed all the sciencey facts that they were given about
that's great stuff.
the different, both of them, you know.
Yeah, it's great stuff. I love it.
Because I learned stuff about Akira I didn't really 100% know before. As well as obviously stuff about X-Men I definitely didn't know, because anytime we do comic book characters, I learn stuff I didn't know, because obviously I'm not caught up on comics at all. So
Me neither. And honestly, that's one thing about it that just, I don't know. It makes me interested to go back and read the comics. Like, I want to read the comics now.
I wish I had time. Like, it's just, there's so many comic books.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
It's a lot more manageable goal for me to be like, I want to go back and read the manga for Akira, because that won't be nearly as hard.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
Rather than like, I'm gonna go catch up on X-Men comics. Like,
again, there's omnibus like things that you can get that abridge the story to like it condenses the most important story elements. So instead of you having to read like massive amounts of comics, instead you just get like a book that's like that thick.
yeah, but you could end up missing out on some of like the best moments that way.
Yes and no, because from what a lot of people say, like the editors of those encapsulate the moments that were the most important and were like the most like for instance, there was one who did like the Marvel Zombies one, the Marvel Zombies Omnibus, and out of it, everyone said there were no points missing that people wanted to see. There was nothing missing. They just cut out the cruft and instead just put out all the stuff that everyone remembered and abridged everything right. It's like One Piece. One Piece, the abridged movies are so much better than the anime because there's no filler. It's literally all just everything you need to see.
Yeah, I mean, people who are fans of One Piece, like big fans of One Piece, were telling me that they didn't recommend watching those, though.
I'm a big fan of One Piece, and I can definitely recommend watching them instead of watching the entire fucking thing. Not everything Oda writes is gold. I'm sorry, but
I mean, to be honest,
skip around on.
To be honest, I'd rather just watch like the main series with a filler guide, because I mean,
even with a filler guide, even with a filler guide, you are still gonna be busy. You are still gonna be extremely busy. But either way, let's go ahead and move on from this. This was Magneto versus Tetsuo, Marvel versus Akira death battle. Hopefully you all enjoyed, and until next time, I'm Nate.
I'm Nick.
See you later, everybody. Peace.